Hello, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Today is August the 15th, 2012. Here are the boxing stories that interest me. You have a huge fight that's taking place at 175 pounds in the United Kingdom between Tony Bellew and Edison Miranda. The date of that fight is September the 8th, 2012. This fight, in my opinion, and it's a 12-rounder, comes down to one simple question. Can Tony Bellew avoid Edison Miranda's right hand? Right? Edison Miranda is a puncher, not a boxer. Right? Miranda is not going to outbox you. What he's going to do is he's going to try to set up a right hand that is on par with any in the sport. Right? He has one punch knockout power, just like Randall Bailey does. Just like Saul Alvarez does with Alvarez's left hook. In other words, you could be completely dominating Edison Miranda. And if he lands that right hand once, it can change the fight. Even guys with far more boxing skills than Miranda, Alan Green, for example, got hit with that right hand, got hurt, never recovered. Now, the secret to Tony Bellew is that even though he walks around with a lot of swag, even though he has a punch, Bellew's best attribute is actually his boxing skills. Right? There's a reason why his fight against Nathan Cleverly was competitive. It wasn't the punch. It was the fact that he was able, at times in that fight, to outbox Nathan Cleverly. What Bellew has to do to win this fight is to fight it on his back foot. Don't bang with a banger, right? As hard as Bellew hits, he doesn't hit as hard as Edison Miranda does, right? When Miranda hits guys right, they're done. Their legs are gone for the fight. As I said before, think Randall Bailey. So Bellew should sit down and watch the Andre Ward versus Edison Miranda fight. He'll see Ward unveil several different ways to beat Miranda, right? Ward starts the fight outside. Once Ward has dissected Miranda, he actually comes inside and is able to tie up Miranda for much of the last 4 rounds of that fight. Right? That's the blueprint on how you beat Edison Miranda. My prediction in this match is I like Tony Bellew to win the match. I think Bellew can outbox Miranda, straddled against Edison Miranda by knockout. Whenever you have a guy with one punch knockout power, right? Randall Bailey, Edison Miranda, he always has a puncher's chance in every fight. If Bellew works this correctly, he should be cautious early, just like Andre Ward. And then he can slowly get more aggressive as the fight continues. But first, he has to figure out the angles of Edison Miranda's right hand. Let's continue. There is another huge fight coming up. This is for the WBA Cruiserweight title. It's taking place October the 27th in Moscow between challenger Denis Lebedev and champion Felix the Cat Guillermo Jones. Now let me just say, Guillermo Jones is one of my favorite fighters. He is the champion for a reason. He's one of the best in the sport at outboxing you. Here's the problem. He's 40 years old. He's only fought twice. You heard correct. Twice. Since 2008. Right? He's not in the best of shape. He doesn't have the foot speed, in my opinion, to keep up with Denis Lebedev. Right? I believe his height is going to work against him. He's 6'4". He's 40 years old. I view any guy who has to squeeze himself into the weight, and keep in mind, Guillermo Jones has fought over 210 in the past in a fight. Right? I believe he's one of these older fighters who's going to have to squeeze himself back down to 200, where he has a title. And I believe he's going to have a very hard time dealing with a mobile opponent. Right? As you look at the Lebedev-James Toney fight, I want you to just see how Lebedev bounces around outside James Toney. I know Toney's not fleet of foot these days, but understand Lebedev is a guy who was even able to, using foot speed, corner Roy Jones. Right? I believe the feet are the key in this fight. My prediction is that the title changes hands. Right? I like Denis Lebedev to win this fight. Keep in mind, the fight is in Moscow. It's in Lebedev's backyard. And even though Guillermo Jones is immensely talented, at 40 years old, this is the story of the sport. I know Lebedev is 33, but he's in much better shape than Jones. At 40 years old, I just don't think Guillermo Jones is going to be able to be Guillermo Jones against a higher volume, faster moving, slick southpaw like Denis Lebedev. And let's be real for a second and understand the level of competition these guys have faced. If you're going to criticize Lebedev for robbing a senior citizen center and fighting James Toney and Roy Jones, understand that Denis Lebedev fought Marco Huck. And in my opinion, he beat Marco Huck. Right? He fought a young lion, and quite frankly, I thought he took apart that young lion. Right? Denis Lebedev is an elite fighter. Keep in mind, too, the Enzo Maccarinelli fight. I know Maccarinelli has been beaten by others. I know Maccarinelli had a timekeeper who helped him in a fight, or so it seems, allegedly. But Maccarinelli got deconstructed by Denis Lebedev pretty convincingly, pretty conclusively, pretty early in that fight. Right? I like Lebedev to win the title against Guillermo Jones. I think he takes Jones's title. But here again, the cat has a huge punch. And if you're betting big money, you need to straddle that play. It's Lebedev to win, straddled against Guillermo Jones by knockout. Right? Let's also talk about some recent comments on another big fight that, like the Lebedev-Jones fight, is going to be fought at a very high level. And that's the Chad Johnson-Andre Ward fight. Now, let me just say this about that fight. Chad Johnson has been a little bit more talkative than usual. In an interview, he said that Andre Ward turned down an offer to fight Johnson at 170 pounds, and that Andre Ward insisted on fighting in Oakland. Now, let me just say, that's what good managers do. Right? Andre Ward's manager is not here to be fair. He's actually here to help his client, Andre Ward. That's the first thing. The second thing is, in this economy, where getting people to pay their hard-earned money on a boxing event takes a lot of effort, right? Because people have bills, people are looking at neighbors who've been foreclosed upon, people are at work, they don't quite have the job security that they once did. They're seeing people laid off at work. They have friends who've been looking for work for several months. In this global slowdown economy, Oakland is the best place for the fight because Oakland is where Andre Ward is a big draw. Keep in mind, there have been fights in Las Vegas and Atlantic City that weren't able to draw flies. Just look at the gate at the Roy Jones versus Bernard Hopkins rematch. And keep in mind, you're talking about two surefire Hall of Famers. That fight couldn't even draw 4,000 people, right? And so, given that Chad Dawson, and I think Dawson's a great fighter, but given that Chad Dawson himself can't draw flies in his backyard of Connecticut, the best place to have this fight is where at least one of the guys is a draw, and that's in Oakland, right? And so, Chad Dawson, I understand, is selling tickets, making statements, being controversial, right? I will say the one thing that does leap out at Chad Dawson's recent interviews is the fact that of the two guys, it was Chad Dawson who wanted this fight. Clearly, Dawson believes he sees something on tape that has him convinced he could beat Andre Ward. I think what he's going to find out is that even though he's bigger than Andre Ward, he's not that much bigger than Andre Ward, right? Andre Ward is big for 168 pounds, right? I believe Andre Ward's a 6-footer. And what he's also going to find out is that Andre Ward might be able to pick up where Bernard Hopkins left off. Let's remember, Bernard Hopkins did go the distance against Dawson in a very competitive fight. And I believe Andre Ward is going to try to get behind Chad Dawson's side profile. Dawson likes to come at you sideways. That can be a blessing. That can also be a curse. I'll say this, of these two guys, I believe that Andre Ward is able to fight in more fight styles. And so, as I've said in an earlier video, the bet I like here is a distance bet. I'll agree that Las Vegas has Dawson as too big of an underdog in the fight, but I will say that I like the over in this fight. And if I had to pick one of these two guys, regardless of the odds, to win the fight, I am leaning toward Andre Ward simply because Ward is a multilingualist when it comes to boxing styles, and he has a pretty good blueprint to look at in that Bernard Hopkins fight, right? I thought Dawson won the Hopkins fight. I predicted Dawson would win the Hopkins fight, but I will say this, Bernard Hopkins was able to get inside on Chad Dawson. He was able to time Dawson's jab. And those are the kind of things I believe Andre Ward should be able to look at and do some things with. Let's talk about some other issues too. In terms of the bad economy, understand that mixed martial arts, and I'm not going to get too deep into it, but they had a show in Denver. And understand that that show, which took place on August 11th, right, only had a live gate of $650,000, making it the lowest gate total for a UFC pay-per-view event in years. Understand that the money is getting harder to come by in these sporting events. Now, speaking of that, you should know that there's a lawsuit that's been filed by a boxing legend. Roy Jones, the fighter I believe was the best fighter of the 1990s. Right? And he's suing Knockout Promotions in Florida federal court because of the cancellation of his fight against Dawson Kostecki. But what's interesting in the lawsuit, if you read through the fine print, is that Roy Jones apparently was only promised to be paid $45,000 to travel to Poland to fight an unbeaten fighter. Right? Now, granted, he was supposed to receive more than 80% of the fight night profits. And, of course, his lawsuit is for in excess of $1 million. But understand the guarantee that Roy was offered was $45,000. Right? For those who think that there's a lot of money in boxing, I encourage you to look at the details of this lawsuit. Keep in mind, too, it's really surprising that the suit got filed because Roy actually did go ahead and fight a replacement in Poland. And let me just say, If you want to see Roy Jones look terrible, take a look at that fight. In that fight, the replacement actually knocked down Roy Jones. Roy Jones got the decision, but it was a hard-fought match that could have gone either way. Let me also point out, too, that the reason the Kostecki fight got canceled is because Kostecki actually had to go on trial for running a prostitution ring. Now, here again, you're telling me that an unbeaten fighter has to run a prostitution ring to supplement his income? That should tell you all you need to know about the lack of money in boxing below the top end, below the Mayweathers, the Pacquiaos, the Klitschko brothers, the Canelos, the Miguel Cottos. Below those guys, you really have a lot of guys fighting for just a few dollars. Let me also point out, too, that you have a fascinating rematch coming up, right? I have a video up on it. It's George Groves' next fight against Kenny Anderson. I encourage you to take a look at that rematch video. Frank Warren won the purse bid. The details of that purse bid have not been made public. All right, well, there you have it for August the 15th, 2012. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you think Guillermo Jones is going to defend his title against Denis Lebedev. Let me know if you think Tony Bellew is going to be able to stay away from Edison Miranda, who's a much harder puncher, by the way, than Nathan Cleverly. Let me know if you think Tony Bellew is going to be able to stay away from Edison Miranda's right hand, as he has to win that fight. And let me know your thoughts on the Roy Jones lawsuit, as well as the upcoming George Groves fight. Let me leave you with this. There are some in Brandon Rios' camp who believe that he's going to come in the ring bigger than Mike Alvarado. Right? They claim that the size gap between the two shouldn't be an issue. Well, let's get real for a moment. I don't care how big Brandon Rios gets. Right? The problem he's going to face is he hasn't been in the ring with a guy as big as Mike Alvarado. It's not what Rios is bringing to the table. It's what Rios is going to face when he hops in the ring with Mike Alvarado. Right? Let me point out that Alvarado has been in the ring with some pretty big guys at 140, like Breeders Prescott. Right? I don't see anything that Brandon Rios is going to bring in the ring that Mike Alvarado will not have already seen. Right? And so, the Rios camp can talk all the game they want, and they can talk about how their guy has been fighting at too light a weight for years. That's all well and good. But just like I believe Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. would discover that size alone won't do him much if he moves up to 168. Right? Just like the Carl Froches of the world would see Chavez as just another guy, so too Mike Alvarado might just see Brandon Rios, who has been getting by, quite frankly, on size and punch at 135. Well, guess what? 140 is a different game, right? It's like going to the majors. Maybe you're hitting that, fastball in the minors. When you get to the bigs, it's a different level. I think Rios is going to find out that it's a different level against Mike Alvarado. Let me hear from you. Thanks for watching.